Hi, I'm Carolyn Williams. I'm a registered dietitian and culinary nutrition expert in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I am also a cookbook author and contributing editor to Cooking Light and Eating Well and a host of other magazines out there. My most recent cookbook is Meals That Heal, so shameless plug for my newest baby, but this is quick and easy anti-inflammatory eating. And I'm going to share with you today in 15 minutes or less, which is going to be a challenge for me, but the superpower of intermittent fasting. And it was really in my initial research into intermittent fasting that actually kind of spurred my interest in inflammation. And inflammation is now kind of my main focus of my writing and of my work. So during the next 14 and a half minutes now, I'm going to share what it is, what intermittent fasting is, the different types, the impact on metabolism, how it's different from your traditional weight loss calorie or diets, and suggested health benefits. And then if we have a second, I'd love to share my personal experience with it. So first off, let's talk about what it is and the three different types or approaches to it. So intermittent fasting is not about necessarily going without. And I know that sounds bizarre if you're not familiar with it or haven't tried it. But intermittent fasting, it is based on controlling the time window in which you eat. So it's not necessarily about cutting your calories. It's definitely not about drastically cutting your calories. It's not about what foods you can't have. It's about controlling that window in which you have them. Now, yes, usually calories, it is harder to get all the calories that you need within a smaller time frame. So usually calories go down slightly, but a lot of people think the weight loss from intermittent fasting is due to significantly less calories, and that's usually not it. My calorie level is not that much lower overall. Where the impact has come from, and where the impact usually comes from for most people when they're trying to lose weight with intermittent fasting, is with that controlled window of time. And you'll understand why in just a second. So there are three main approaches. 16-8 is the one that I try to follow or use on a regular basis. It's just, I found it's most doable for people. It works. It's very flexible. It works with whatever I've got going on during the day or week. And it's pretty adaptable. 24 or 16-hour fast are essentially the same thing, but you're just extending that window a little longer. And let me back up because I didn't then tell you what 16-8 was. But 16-8 is essentially referring to a 16-hour fasting window followed by an 8-hour feeding window or eating window. So you can eat, but it's only going to be within an 8-hour window. You're going to fast for 16 hours. So for example, let me explain how this might work, because 16 hours sounds like a long time, but in reality, I end my dinner at 7 o'clock at night. Fast forward 16 hours, and technically my fasting window can end at 11 a.m. That's not too bad. I'm asleep for at least half of that, and then I tend to be a morning person, so I'm busy. And so usually before I know it, and because hunger tends to not be a factor with intermittent fasting, I know that sounds bizarre, but appetite actually decreases somewhat the longer you go in a fast. I often go past 11 o'clock on the days that I'm fasting and not even realize it, go a little beyond that. So there's 16-8, there's 24-36 that go a little bit longer. 24 and 36 hours, research has suggested that you may get additional health benefits. But that is not required. So don't let that overwhelm you if you've never tried this before. That's if you like basic fasting and want to go further. You are still getting health benefits as well as weight loss benefits if you go 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours. The last approach is the 5-2 approach. So this is a little bit different in that 5 days out of the week, you're going to eat a regular calorie level. 2 days out of the week, you're going to eat a significantly lower calorie level. And by lower, I mean about 400 to 500 for a female, 500 to 600 for a male. So a quarter or less of what your calorie needs would be on a daily basis. All of these methods work. All of them give you some of the same health benefits and weight loss. It really is figuring out what works for you. And again, 16-8 is what I've found is most doable for a lot of people, but all of them are good methods to follow. So it was really changing research that was coming out 4 or 5 years ago on metabolism that first got me intrigued with intermittent fasting. I was asked to write an article on, how do you really need 6 small meals a day? How many times should you eat for metabolism? And honestly, I thought, this article will be a breeze. But I did my due diligence and started digging up the research just to double check myself. And what I found is, no, this article is not going to be a breeze because research had shifted a lot since I had last looked at metabolism research. And since I had been an undergrad getting my nutrition degree. And it really kind of shook my knowledge base for a while because it was so different from what I learned. But I had to go with what the research is suggesting, and today we even have a lot more to back that up. But basically, what I had been telling people, what I had been thinking, my own approach to eating, and that going too long without eating would slow our metabolism was false. What research suggests now is that going periods of time, 4, 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, even 36 hours, without eating, that does not slow our metabolism. So it was really contradictory to what I'd learned. But again, you have to look at the research. And we had new research that was coming out. And this isn't just one study. This is multiple. And today we have even more. But this also contradicted what I'd been trained. And again, my undergrad with counseling and what I've been telling people for years, and that we need 6 small meals a day, or we just need regular meals and snacks to keep our metabolism going, to fuel our body. And once I kind of got in the metabolism research and started looking at the fasting research, that really wasn't true either. So again, another major shift in my professional mindset that I had to really come to terms with. And while it is the metabolism effects that may first interest people or get them intrigued with how fasting works, the benefits from fasting largely come because of the effects or the changes to hormones. And this is because there are 2 modes of operation in our body. There's a feeding mode and there's a fasting mode, okay? And you need both. And essentially they should be about equal in duration. So 12 hours and 12 hours, if you will. Now, let me explain what happens in each of these modes. And I'm not going to get too heavy in the science, but I do think it helps a lot if you understand why you're doing what you're doing if you do try fasting. So in the feeding mode, that's that window of time. Let's just say for me, it's 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Or maybe for someone else, it might be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's just that window of time. So you eat your first or consume or drink your first thing at 7 a.m. and then the last thing you eat or drink is at 7 p.m. That would be considered your feeding window. And during that time, at various times, you may be taking in breakfast, meals, snacks, whatever, during the day, periodically. What's happening is you digest that food and the carbohydrate in it will eventually get broken down into glucose. The glucose is absorbed into your bloodstream. So your blood sugar, your blood glucose rises. That is completely normal. That's what's supposed to happen. What's also normal is your pancreas then secretes insulin to help your body or to help lower your blood glucose level. Your pancreas secretes the insulin, and that is normal. That's what's supposed to happen. And the insulin helps that glucose in the bloodstream, helps the body's cells use it. And if the body's cells don't need it, it stores that glucose. So the insulin will its first kind of mode of operation is to, if any cells need energy right then, it will help those cells immediately use that glucose and break it down for energy. But your needs at that time may or may not be that high. So if you don't need a lot of that glucose that's floating around your bloodstream, then the insulin can direct some of that excess glucose to be stored as glycogen. And this is like a short-term storage form of glucose, and it's stored in your muscles and your liver. And it's nice, it's limited, but it's nice in that 3, 4, 5 hours down the road, 6 hours down the road, if I go to the gym or I go walk the dog or go to the grocery store and I need some energy, my cells need energy, my body can quickly break that glycogen down into glucose, and it can go in my bloodstream and my cells can break it down for energy. So, but if you still have an excess amount of glucose in your bloodstream, then your body's got to do something with it to help pull it out of the bloodstream to lower your blood sugar level. So it will store that excess energy, that excess glucose, as fat in your adipose tissue. Okay, your fat tissue is unlimited in its storage, and it's essentially your backup energy reserve, or that's kind of how it was designed. So that's feeding. Fasting mode is, let's say I ended my dinner, or you end anybody can end their meal or they're eating for the day at 7 p.m. Okay, fast forward 3, 4, 5 hours later, and as my cells gradually may need energy during the night, my body can break any glycogen down that I've stored and release that glucose, and I've got an immediate supply of glucose for my cells to use for energy, which is why we don't just pass out or black out. But let's fast forward 8, 10, 12 hours. Well, that backup supply of glycogen is, we don't have as much anymore. It's almost gone. So at that point, the body is forced to find another fuel. And at that point, it starts tapping into your fat stores. Your glucose level is essentially the same, but your insulin level is low because your insulin level is low because your glucose isn't going up and down because you're not eating and you haven't been for a while. Your glucose remains stable though. That's the interesting thing. But insulin is low, and when insulin's low, that allows the body to tap into your fat stores and break them down and trigger that fat burning. So again, you're supposed to have an equal amount, or these are supposed to go hand in hand. Both are normal physiological processes that are supposed to happen. And what Dr. Jason Fung suggests, who is one of what I consider one of the thought leaders in intermittent fasting. He wrote the Obesity Code, and if you're interested in the science, I highly recommend you check it out. It is pretty science heavy though. But what he suggests is that our feeding window has gotten larger. It's gotten bigger over the course of time, particularly after the 1970s and forward. And if you think about it, starting in the 1980s and going forward, that's really when we started to see all these new convenience products and things were quick and easy and we could stick in the microwave. It's also when we started to see all these fast food places popping up on every corner, quick service restaurants. I mean, think about our food environment now compared to in the 1950s or 60s. We are surrounded by food wherever we go. We have availability to it. So what's happened is, rather than like in the 1950s and 60s when we might have a breakfast and then have dinner or have lunch, have dinner, whatever, our eating day was done and our feeding window is about truly 12 hours. And we didn't eat again until breakfast the next day, usually 12 hours or so from then. What's happened is our feeding window has gotten bigger and bigger. So we may start having a coffee drink at 6, and then we are having a bowl of ice cream at 10 o'clock that night. So our feeding window is 14, 15, 16 hours, which means our fasting window is going down. And so when you look at that, when you think about the effects on fat storage and fat burning, that means we're spending a larger proportion of our time in fat storage and a much lower amount in fat burning. In fact, we may not even get to that need to ever break down fat and burn fat for energy. So to me, this really explains why calories in, calories out. I know that math never worked in my own body, and we've known there's more to it than calories, and this helps explain some of that, what else there is to it. This also helps explain the obesity epidemic a little bit more. So how is IF or intermittent fasting different from traditional weight loss? Well, it mainly has to do with the actual weight loss. Now, if you look pound for pound, it's not too different from your traditional diets that cut calories. It's about the same. IF weight loss may be a little bit higher, but where it differs in is you lose in that. Let's say you step on the scale and you've lost a pound, or that's what it says. Well, with traditional diet methods, probably only about a quarter of that pound, a quarter to a half, is true fat that you've lost. A quarter of that or more is lean body mass that you've lost, and then there's some water in there that you've lost as well. We'd like to think that the whole pound is a loss of fat, but it's not. What we see with intermittent fasting, in that pound that you might lose, a higher proportion of that is from fat loss. A much lower proportion of that is from lean body mass, which helps preserve that metabolism. And that's because fasting triggers an increase in human growth hormone, which helps us hang on to that lean body mass, which is what we want, and that helps preserve our metabolism. Other difference is fasting is not about deprivation or starvation. It's not about drastic calorie reduction. It's just more about controlling the period of time in which we eat. So I can still have pretty much anything I want. Now, granted, I should make healthy choices because I'm trying to squeeze all the nutrients I need into an 8-hour window. But it's not about what I can't have or what I can't go over. It's just eating within that window. So health benefits, obviously weight loss is one, and it preserves that lean body mass as well as metabolism, may even increase metabolism slightly. There are some studies that suggest metabolism may even increase by 3 to 14% during fast. But also it has other major health effects, and one of the big ones is it improves your glucose management. It can improve or decrease your insulin resistance. It lowers hemoglobin A1C. It reduces inflammation, which is, I've mentioned is a big interest for me. Inflammation is at the root of every health condition affecting Americans today, whether it is weight loss, whether it's heart disease, cancer, autoimmune diseases. Inflammation is that underlying driver in your body that can be pushing all those conditions forward. So anything you can do to reduce that inflammation is good. It also improves brain health. A lot of people say when they're fasting they have a heightened sense of focus or concentration. That's somewhat subjective just because that's more qualitative in nature. But what I do want to point out about brain health is a lot of people don't realize Alzheimer's is nicknamed type 3 diabetes because of the higher glucose levels in the brain that have been correlated with an increased Alzheimer's risk. And so intermittent fasting helps regulate that glucose level and has been suggested to reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, possibly even slow its development. And then it has been shown to slow the aging process. So really quick, what's allowed during fasting? So there is no medically defined protocol for intermittent fasting right now. So any plan you see out there, any expert, any book you see on fasting is essentially that person's opinion, or hopefully they have a scientific background in nutrition or medicine. And that's their opinion. That's what's worked for them. That's what they're recommending for people. So there is no exact right or wrong way right now. I say all that because you will find plans vary greatly about what you can consume during your fasting window. Some will say you can only have water. Some will say you can only have water and black coffee. Others are a little bit more lenient. Some will say you can have water, black coffee. You can have Bulletproof coffee, which is that coffee with a little bit of fat in it. If you want to. Some will even say you can have up to 40 calories of something that will not break your fast. The reason you can add fat to your coffee, it technically doesn't break your fast. Yes, you're getting calories, so it breaks your fast, but it doesn't break it in the sense of it increases insulin any. And you're still in the fat burning zone, and that's because fat doesn't trigger an insulin response. So you still stay in that fat burning zone. So you will see it's all across the board. There's no right or wrong way. Find what works for you. I tend to be on the more lenient side. I'm going to have water. I'm going to have coffee. I may even put a splash of 10 calories of unsweetened almond milk in my coffee. I may even have the Bulletproof coffee if I'm really hungry one morning because that fat in the coffee can really help with satiety. So who might consider it? If you're trying to lose weight, it is something that you definitely may want to consider. It's not for everybody, but where I've seen it particularly helpful is people who really struggle with carb intake or insulin resistance. I've also really seen it helpful for older females, older to middle-aged females who are really struggling to lose weight. And we know that hormones are at play. This is one approach that I've really seen actually be successful in those individuals. So who might want to avoid it? If you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, if you definitely want to avoid it. Children, we just don't know enough about the potential effects. You don't want to risk them not getting enough nutrients. And then if you have a major health condition, typically with diabetes, it can have some positive results, same with heart disease and other conditions, but you always want to check with your doctor before you try any of those, particularly if you're on diabetes medications or anything. You will likely have to change those up some when you are fasting. So let me know what I didn't cover, because that was super quick and I know I went over my 15 minutes, but I'll be answering questions. So let me know what else you'd like to know or what I didn't cover. And again, I'm Carolyn Williams. My cookbook is Meals That Heal, Anti-Inflammatory Eating, and you can find this on my website along with my social media. So thanks for having me today. So I'm going to jump right to the first one that we've gotten. I'll read the question, and it says, what are the most ideal hours to eat? Morning and lunch, lunch and dinner? What specific hours are best? Honestly, what is most key is just getting that fasting break in, whether that may be 12 hours for someone, or whether that's 16 hours, or whether that's 18 hours, whatever that is. Finding what time frame that works best for you is really what's key. For me, I have found that having my eating window from 11 to 6 or 11 to 7 works really well for me, just with my lifestyle, and then having kids, it allows me to still have family dinner with them. Interestingly though, I was just doing some research yesterday on meal timing, and one of the things that research does back up is that if you can kind of front load your day, so load more of your nutrients and your calories in the first part of the day, or at least not right before dinner. We tend to make dinner our heaviest meal. That's really not what we want to do. So ideally, and again, the thing to focus on is getting that fasting window in. But what I mean by front loading is when I do break my fast, let's say at 11, if I can really focus on getting the majority of my calories for the day in, maybe from 11 to 3. So having a really, large lunch, and then maybe a snack, and then my dinner or and another snack or whatever I have, it is fairly lighter compared to that first meal and snack that I have during the day. So I hope that answers. But again, focus on getting just that fasting break in. That's what's most key and what's going to work for you. Okay, so my next question. I've tried to do this myself, but I get really fatigued and foggy in my mind, so I can't fast for that long. Is there a way to ease into this to get past that ill feeling while trying? Definitely. And I'll tell you some things that I have learned personally on my own when I have done it. First, I do a 16-8 approach. So I'm not sure what this person may be using, but I found that's the easiest one. And start by just going 12 hours. Okay. You still get benefits by going 12 hours. Now, the longer you go, you get greater benefit, particularly when it comes to weight loss, if that's your goal. Because really it's kind of around that 10, 11, 12 hour where your body switches over into actually the fat burning mode. So really, if you can go to 13 hours, to 14, to 15, to 16, that's ideal. But going 12 is good. Start there. Take some baby steps. Then go to 13 hours. Then go to 14. Also, the other trick that I have learned personally for me, and I tell people about this, and it's made a lot of difference, or it seems to make a lot of difference for them, is your carbohydrates that you eat those. And this kind of piggybacks on my last question where I was saying front load your day, get your calories and in the first half of your eating window. Do that for your carbs. The nights where I end up, and I typically try to make my dinners more heavy in vegetables and protein. But the nights where I do have carbs, where maybe I have that pasta or maybe I have a bowl of ice cream with my kids or something, those are the next mornings where I struggle. And I think it totally goes back to messing with my glucose. And then that makes my fasting window a little bit harder. So I have just learned, I know I ate ice cream last night with my kids. We went out to get it. And this morning was a major struggle just because my blood sugar is just fluctuating a little bit more than usual. So try to get your carbs in the first half of your fasting window or most of those, and then avoid any of those added sugars definitely at your last meal or before bed. Okay, that's a great question though, because you never want to feel sick. Also, one other thing I would say is try the Bulletproof coffee. Try some of that. I know it sounds gross if you've never had it, but from the mornings where I can just tell, oh, I may be struggling a little with hunger, and a lot of times it's not even true hunger. It's more maybe just kind of lower blood sugar and almost more mindset. You just watching the clock so when you can eat. Try putting a little bit of fat in your coffee. That satiety can get you through several hours, I promise. And there's an actual recipe for Bulletproof coffee. There's a whole company, but what I do is I just put a cup of coffee in my blender. I add a little bit of butter. I don't do the full amount. I do about half a teaspoon of butter. I do about a teaspoon of MCT oil, but just adding any kind of fat, and I do a splash of unsweetened almond milk and put it in the blender for a second, and it's like latte. So that can give you a lot of satiety and help you not feel sick. So I don't want anyone feeling sick or like they're going to pass out or anything. Okay, so is the question of eating 3 full meals a day a myth or a dated concept? So this is a great one too. And again, this ties right into the research that I was actually doing for a new article I'm working on yesterday. When I went to school 20 years ago, I guess, in my undergrad degree, we were trained to think, okay, we need to eat 3 meals a day, and snacks are a good thing regularly because we need to eat regularly to keep our metabolism going. That was my mindset. That's how I've been counseling people for years. So what really got me interested in intermittent fasting was I was asked to write an article about 4 years ago for Cooking Light. And I'm not sure, I may have mentioned this to y'all, but they said, we want an article on how many meals you should eat a day. If you really need, what's better, 2 meals a day or 6 small snack meals or meals and snacks. And I thought, oh, this will be a breeze. But, and I kind of was thinking, this is kind of a boring article. Well, they were kind of owned the intermittent research that was starting to come out at that time. And back then there wasn't nearly as much as we have now. But I thought this is kind of a boring article, but I did my due diligence, dug into the research, and that's when it kind of just hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not how I was trained. What this research is suggesting is that it's good to go long periods of time without eating, like 12 hours or so. Like, we don't need to just keep feeding our body to keep metabolism up, to keep energy going. And so that's kind of what led into the intermittent fasting interest. But where this also headed is it totally contradicted this whole 6 meal a day or even 3 meals a day. 3 meals a day, there is nothing wrong with that. I don't think we need to eat 3 meals and snack throughout the day as well. But 3 meals is fine. When I'm fasting, I usually end up with 2 meals and maybe a snack, just because it kind of aligns with, again, my lifestyle. I have a large lunch. I'll usually have maybe a snack late afternoon, and then I'll have a lighter dinner. 3 meals is fine though. That's fine to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's also don't want people to feel like there is something wrong if they don't eat 3 meals. 2 meals a day is fine. So it's kind of whatever works. But I think what we definitely know is that we don't need this large 12-hour eating window, 14-hour eating window. And also, people used to kind of get jaded for skipping breakfast or something. You don't have to have 3 meals a day to be healthy. So the key is you just want to get those calories and key nutrients in when you do eat. Okay, so here's another one. Are there any risks of doing IF, of doing intermittent fasting? Yes. They are not as many as what you would think. But I will say, if you have a chronic condition, particularly if you have diabetes and you are taking any kind of medication that regulates your blood glucose or your insulin levels, or you're taking any kind of medication, maybe you don't have diabetes, but that impacts your blood glucose or insulin regulation, you want to check with your doctor first. You never want to do it if you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, if you are, if you're not in good health, then this is probably intermittent fasting. It may not be where you want to go right now. I wouldn't recommend it for children. We just don't have enough research on it right now. And I think the real risk for children is not necessarily going too long, but probably not in their eating window, is not getting all the nutrients and calories that they need for growth. So you never want to hinder that. But for the most part, what's surprising, people think it's really kind of risky to do IF, but for most people, there are benefits to it. You just may need to be a little bit careful if you have some underlying conditions and work with your healthcare provider. Okay, is the 1 meal per day method any less or more healthy than the 16-8 method? Again, this goes back to kind of whatever works for your lifestyle as well as approach. I know Dr. Jason Fung, who I mentioned in my presentation, he has got lots of different approaches depending on if your weight loss has stalled or maybe you're not trying to lose weight. There are other benefits you're going for. And 1 meal a day is an approach that he uses. Honestly, I could probably be fine with 1 meal a day. I just like food. And again, I'm trying to, I like how the 16-8 works for my lifestyle. I never feel deprived because I have this huge 8-hour window to eat and I'm able to eat lunch. And, again, you got to remember I'm a food person too. So I get to have, 2 meals a day, 3 meals if I want. So I get this great lunch. I get to eat dinner with my kids. I don't feel deprived because I get that eating window. So, as long as you're making healthy choices, whether that's 1 meal or, several meals or 2 meals or whatever that is in your eating window, and you're getting adequate calories and you're getting adequate nutrients, I don't think it necessarily makes a huge difference. Okay, how can we adapt our bodies to exercise when fasting? Every time I try to do workouts early in the morning before eating breakfast, I always get dizzy and nauseous. Okay, this is a great question because this is one that held me off from trying intermittent fasting for a while because I mentioned I'm a morning person. That I am definitely an exercise morning person. If I wait till the afternoon, it's just not going to happen. And because I have little kids, that means my exercise usually has to happen like 5 or 6 a.m. And I just thought there's no way I'm going to be able to do my workouts at 5 or 6 a.m. And so I just thought there's no reason to try intermittent fasting because I cannot give up my workouts early morning up because there's no other time to do them or I won't do them. And so that really, I let that be an excuse for a while. And then I really tried it. And what I found is that if I have eaten a healthy dinner the night before, again, I have avoided a lot of carbs. I have focused my carbs mainly, gotten vegetables as my main form of carbs, high fiber vegetables. And I've avoided any added sugars, then usually I'm fine the next morning to work out. I don't have that nauseous feeling. Now, when I might is like when I said, like last night I ate ice cream. Well, then that's when I wake up with kind of a pit in my stomach, which usually means your blood sugar may be slightly low or maybe feel kind of nauseous. That's when I feel lightheaded or kind of nauseous when I'm working out. But if you eat a healthy dinner the night before and you're getting adequate calories the day before, and you're hydrated, you should be fine. Also, electrolyte water can make a huge difference. Like the Smart Waters, I know there's an actual brand called Smart Water, and that's one of them, but there are other ones too. You could even do like the Gatorade Zero or the Vitamin Water Zero that has a little taste to it, both electrolytes. Okay, any other questions? Let me check. Well, I've loved being here with y'all today, and I love the interest. Again, this has become somewhat of a passion of mine, and again, it's kind of blows my mind how much I like intermittent fasting because it was something that I truly thought was not for me and that I would just hate altogether and not even make it the first day through. So I've loved being here with you to share with you. Love for you to check out my Instagram. I am real food, real life _RD, Carolyn Williams, and my website is Carolyn Williams RD. And then don't forget, I'd love for you to check out my cookbook, Meals That Heal, 100 plus everyday anti-inflammatory recipes in 30 minutes or less. I'm a busy mom, so we've got to make healthy, quick, and easy. You can buy this on my website, which is carolynwilliamsrd.com, or you can find this on Amazon, and you should be able to find it at all your major bookstores. So thank y'all so much for having me, and I've loved being with you.